My name is Ariel Vale. I am 28 years old. And for 4 years, I thought I understood the man sleeping beside me every night. His name was Brandon Cross. 27. Charming in that lazy, effortless way that made strangers trust him before he earned it. We had been together for 4 years, and living together for 2. We split bills, bought the same coffee every Sunday, argued over thermostat settings, and talked about maybe getting married next year like it was a normal, reasonable future waiting for us. I thought we were solid. That was my first mistake. About 3 months before everything exploded, Brandon started spending time with Jasmine. Jasmine was his ex-girlfriend. He hated when I used that word. She's not just my ex, he said once, barely looking up from his phone. She was part of my life before you. You don't erase history because someone new gets insecure. Someone new. 4 years together. And somehow, I was still the new person in his story. At first, I tried to be understanding. Jasmine had just separated from her husband, Nolan. Brandon said she was lonely. He said she needed friends. He said I should be mature enough to handle 2 adults having a history, but the history started getting loud. Multiple dinners a week. Drinks after work. Texts after midnight. Brandon smiling at his phone, then flipping it face down when I walked into the room. He started using the same sentence for everything. Just catching up with Jas. One evening, I came home early with a migraine. The apartment was quiet except for Brandon's laugh coming from the living room. I stepped inside and stopped. Brandon and Jasmine were on our couch. Not sitting like old friends. Sitting like people who had forgotten the world could walk in on them. Her hand was on his knee. His fingers were brushing a strand of hair away from her face. They were looking at each other with that soft, private expression people save for hotel rooms and almost confessions. They jumped apart when they saw me. I remember the room going cold. I said, "What's going on?" Jasmine grabbed her bag so fast, she nearly knocked over the wine glass on the coffee table. Brandon stood up. "Why are you home?" "I have a migraine," I said. "But that's not the question." Jasmine mumbled something about needing to go, and practically ran out. The second the door shut, Brandon turned on me. "You embarrassed her." I stared at him. "I embarrassed her. She's going through a divorce. Ariel. She doesn't need you acting paranoid." "What was that?" "Nothing. Her hand was on your leg. She was upset. You were touching her face. She was crying earlier. She wasn't crying when I walked in." His jaw tightened. "You're making this ugly." And somehow, that was the moment I understood how betrayal works. It does not always arrive with lipstick on a collar. Sometimes it arrives as a calm man, convincing you that your eyes are the problem. I let it go that night. But I was not stupid. After that, I paid attention. Brandon came home smelling like Jasmine's perfume. He started showering immediately after catching up. Restaurant charges appeared on our shared card, from places I had never been invited to. Movie tickets for 2 showed up during hours. He claimed he was working late. 2 weeks later, I confronted him directly. We were in the kitchen. Rain tapping against the windows. His phone buzzing face down beside his coffee mug. I said, "Are you having an affair with Jasmine?" He actually laughed, not nervously, like I had asked something childish. "An affair," he said. "With Jasmine. You're emotionally involved with her. Maybe physically too. She's my ex." "Ariel, that doesn't make it better. It makes it different." "No, it doesn't." He leaned back, almost amused. "You seriously don't get it? Then explain it." He looked me dead in the eye and said, "It's not cheating if it's with someone who is already part of my life." I went still. He continued, like he had rehearsed it. "Jasmine and I have history. It's not some random woman. It's complicated. It doesn't take anything away from us. It takes trust away from us. You're being insecure. You're sneaking around with your ex. I'm supporting someone I care about. You're dating her behind my back. His face hardened. God. Ariel. This is why I didn't tell you things. You twist everything. Something inside me went very quiet. I asked. So if I started spending nights with an ex, hiding texts, going to dinners, letting him touch me on our couch, that would be fine. His answer came too fast. That's different. How? Because you'd be doing it to hurt me. I almost laughed. But it got stuck in my throat. He had built himself a rule that only worked in one direction, so I nodded. Got it, I said. Crystal clear. He looked relieved. Like the conversation was over, and he had won. But I had not accepted his logic. I had memorized it. Over the next few days, I did something Brandon never expected me to do. I stopped arguing. I stopped asking where he was going. I stopped reacting when Jasmine's name flashed across his screen. I stopped giving him the satisfaction of watching me bleed in small, controlled doses. Instead, I researched. Jasmine's Instagram was easy to find. Her bio said separated, healing, choosing truth. Choosing truth. That almost made me laugh. A few minutes later, I found her ex-husband, Nolan Mercer, personal trainer. 30. Clean smile. Gym photos. Hiking photos. One old wedding photo, still buried deep in his feed. Like he had not had the heart to delete the evidence that he once believed in her. I sent him a message. Hi. Nolan. My name is Ariel. I'm Brandon's girlfriend. I think Jasmine may be involved with him. I'm sorry to message you like this, but I think we should talk. He replied within an hour. I wondered when someone would find me. Coffee. We met that evening, at a quiet bar near the river. Nolan looked exhausted in the way people look when they have already grieved something twice. I barely sat down before he said, "Let me guess." She told him it doesn't count because they have history. My stomach dropped. I said, Brandon used almost those exact words. Nolan gave a humorless smile. Of course he did. For 3 hours, we compared notes. Jasmine had done the same thing during her marriage. Late nights. Sacred message. Emotional emergencies that only one specific person could fix. If Nolan questioned it, she called him controlling. If he asked for boundaries, she said he was insecure. If he got angry, she said anger proved he was unsafe. She makes betrayal sound like healing. Nolan said quietly. That sentence stayed with me. He told me Jasmine had left him convinced he was the villain of their marriage. She cried to friends, posted vague quotes, said Nolan couldn't handle her truth. Meanwhile, he had been trying to hold together a relationship where the rules changed every time he got hurt. I told him about Brandon. The couch, the dinners, the line, it's not cheating if it's with someone who was already part of my life. Nolan leaned back and rubbed both hands over his face. People like them don't want forgiveness, he said. They want permission in advance. Something shifted in me then. Not rage, clarity, I said. What if they had to hear their own logic out loud? Nolan looked at me. What do you mean? I looked down at my untouched drink. If Brandon thinks history makes betrayal harmless, then maybe I should bring someone with history too. Nolan stared at me for 5 full seconds. Then he started laughing. No. Yes. Ariel. That is insane. I know. He paused. Then, his smile changed. I'm listening. We planned it over the next week. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing cruel beyond the mirror they had built themselves. Nolan and I were not romantically involved. We were 2 strangers connected by the same storm. But we took a few harmless photos together. Coffee cups. A walk by the river. One picture where he stood beside me, with his arm loosely around my shoulder. I posted one with the caption, "Funny how life introduces you to exactly who you need." Brandon saw it within 20 minutes. Who's that? He asked. A friend. What friend? Someone who understands complicated history. His face tightened. For the first time in months. He looked uncomfortable. I smiled gently. Relax. Don't be insecure. He did not like hearing his own language come out of my mouth. That Saturday, I told him I wanted to host dinner. I want to meet Jasmine properly. I said, "You were right. I should be supportive." His expression softened with relief so fast it almost hurt. Seriously. Seriously. He kissed my forehead. That kiss felt like the closing of a door. Jasmine arrived at 7, with wine and the confidence of a woman who believed she had already won. Brandon hovered around her like my apartment was suddenly hers too. They laughed too loudly. Shared looks too long. Jasmine complimented the candles and said, "This is mature of you." "Ariel," I said. "I'm trying." At 7:30. The doorbell rang. Brandon frowned. "Are we expecting someone?" I wiped my hands on a towel. "Yes," I said. "My date?" The room froze. I opened the door. Nolan stood there in a dark button-down, holding flowers. "Hey," he said warmly, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "Sorry I'm late." When I walked back into the dining room with him, Jasmine went pale. Brandon's face changed slowly, like his mind was trying to reject what his eyes were seeing. I said, "Brandon." "Jasmine. This is Nolan." Nolan looked directly at Jasmine. "Hey." "Yes." For one perfect second, no one breathed. Then Brandon said, "What the hell is this?" I set the flowers on the counter. "This is my date." His voice cracked. "Your date?" I nodded. "You said history makes things different." "Nolan and I have history now." Jasmine stood up so fast, her chair scraped the floor. "This is sick." Nolan smiled faintly. "Interesting. That word never came up when you were doing it." Brandon turned on me. "You're cheating on me to prove a point." I tilted my head. "Cheating? No. It's with someone connected to the past? According to you, that doesn't count. That's different." "How?" "Because you don't love him. And you love Jasmine." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. That silence answered more than any confession could. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Brandon looked at me as though I had become a completely different woman in the space of 30 seconds. "This isn't funny," he said. "I agree." I replied calmly. "None of this is—" Jasmine folded her arms. "So this is revenge?" "No," I said. "It's perspective." Brandon pointed at Nolan. "You're doing this just to hurt me." I smiled sadly. "That's interesting. When I said your relationship with Jasmine hurt me, you called me insecure." His face flushed. "This isn't the same." "Then, explain the difference." He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Jasmine for help. She stepped in immediately. "You're manipulating him." I nodded once. "Yes." For about 1 hour. Then I looked directly at Brandon. "You manipulated me for 3 months." Neither of them answered. Nolan finally spoke. "You know what's funny, Ariel, and I haven't lied once tonight." Jasmine laughed bitterly. "Oh. Please." "No." Nolan continued. "She invited you here." I walked through the front door. "Everyone knows exactly why I'm here now." He paused. "You two built an entire relationship behind excuses." Brandon slammed his hand on the table. "We didn't have a relationship. You had enough of one to destroy ours." I said quietly. The room fell silent again. I reached into my purse and placed several printed restaurant receipts on the table. Dinner reservations, movie tickets, hotel parking receipts, phone records, showing hours of late-night calls. Brandon stared at them. "You went through my accounts?" "Our accounts?" I corrected. "You said I was imagining things." I placed another page on top. "I stopped imagining." Jasmine looked away. For the first time all evening, she seemed uncertain. Brandon tried one last time. "Ariel." Nothing physical happened. I looked at him for a long moment. "Do you remember what you told me?" He said nothing. "You said history made it acceptable." I leaned forward. "Healthy relationships don't need loopholes. That sentence finally broke something inside him. He rubbed both hands over his face. I didn't think it would go this far. No, I said softly. You thought I'd stay? I stood. So here's what happens next. I took my apartment key off my keychain and held it out. You're moving out. Ariel. No. We can fix this. You spent months protecting someone else's feelings while asking me to doubt my own. He looked genuinely frightened now. Please. I loved you. I said. I know. No. My voice stayed calm. You loved being forgiven. That landed harder than shouting ever could. He lowered his eyes. Jasmine grabbed her purse. This whole thing is pathetic. Nolan smiled politely. I remember saying something similar after our divorce. She glared at him. You're still bitter. No, he answered. I just finally stopped being confused. They left together. Brandon tried twice to turn back toward me. I never moved. The apartment door closed. The silence afterward felt almost sacred. Nolan looked around the empty dining room. Well, he said, the salmon smells amazing. I laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I'd had in months. We sat down and actually ate dinner. Not as a couple. Not pretending anymore. Just two people who finally understood that neither of us had been crazy. Over the next week, Brandon called constantly. First came apologies, then excuses, then tears, then anger. He said I had humiliated him. He said I had destroyed his reputation. He said I should have handled things privately. I replied only once. You had every opportunity to be honest before I ever planned dinner. After that, I stopped responding. He showed up outside my apartment twice. I didn't answer. Then his older sister called. She says you overreacted. I simply asked one question. If I had done everything Brandon did with my ex, would he have accepted it? She was quiet for nearly 10 seconds. I don't know. I do. She never called again. Meanwhile, Nolan and I continued meeting. Coffee became basketball games. Basketball became concerts. Conversations that began with betrayal slowly shifted toward work, family, books, and everything else life still had to offer. It was strange how quickly trust formed, once neither of us had to defend reality anymore. Months passed. Brandon and Jasmine finally made their relationship public. Their social media filled with captions about choosing happiness and living authentically. People congratulated them. Others quietly remembered the timeline. Questions appeared in the comments. Neither of them answered. A few months later, Brandon contacted Nolan. Not me. Nolan called afterward. You'll appreciate this. What happened? He wanted advice. I blinked. Advice. He thinks Jasmine has been emotionally distant. I couldn't help smiling. Nolan continued. He asked whether I ever noticed warning signs. The irony was almost impossible to comprehend. The man who had insisted emotional boundaries didn't matter was suddenly terrified they did. Life has a remarkable sense of symmetry. About 6 months after our dinner, I met someone at a climbing gym. His name was Ethan Kent Bessing. The sort of man who answered messages without hiding his screen. The sort of man who introduced me to friends instead of explaining why I shouldn't worry about them. When I eventually told him the entire story, he laughed, until he nearly dropped his coffee. You and Nolan actually pretended to date for one dinner, and it worked. It didn't save my relationship. No, he admitted. It revealed what it really was. Nolan eventually met someone wonderful too. Her name was Amara. She adored our ridiculous origin story. Sometimes the three of us joked that Brandon and Jasmine had accidentally introduced two complete strangers who became lifelong friends. Nearly a year after everything ended, Brandon sent one final message. I know I don't deserve another chance. I just hope someday you'll remember the good parts of us. I looked at the screen for a long time. There had been good parts. Real honest. That was what made betrayal hurt so much. But memories are not contracts. Love is not an obligation. And trust, once someone teaches you, it can be negotiated. Never returns exactly the way it was. I deleted the message without replying. Some endings don't need the final word. They only need the final choice.